Welcome to a session on the problems of translating prose. So, prose translation is basically the translation of novels, essays, fiction, short stories, comedy, folk tales, hagiography, works of criticism, science fiction, etc. Hagiographies are usually, works written in praise of someone, usually for a political purpose, like biography. It is translation, prose translation is a type of literary creativeness where the written work of the language is recreated in another language. And the Wycliffe Bible was the original grand English translation, and it illustrated the flaws of an English prose that was weak in nature. And when the source and the target language belong to different cultural groups, for example, if it is an Indian language and a foreign language, the first problem faced by the prose translator is finding terms that express the highest level of faithfulness. These are the situations when it gets difficult. For example, words related to typical fabrics, cookery specialities, or jobs. They also represent specific culture and the translators should be very careful in translating such words. So cultural aspects are the most difficult part when it comes to translating prose, and also ambiguous puns, also the titles of the stories and novels. This also might be difficult when being translated from one language to another. So, a literary translator must also be skilled enough to translate feelings, uh, nuances, cultural nuances, humor, and other delicate elements of a piece of work. Translators do not translate meanings but messages. Thus, the text must be considered in the totality. So it is not just meanings that are translated, but the whole intention of the text must be translated. For example, the translated work Thomas. It is something that was written in Hindi, but it was later translated into English. So the partition history, the independence, and all these things, uh, it that had to be translated instead of singular events that happened in the story. And Peter Newmark delineates translation as rendering the meaning of a text into another language in the way that the author intended the text. So the author's intentions are also considered to be important. The word works as the key ingredient. The word itself, the words used has got the artistic function. And, the tricky action of translation happens between the start and the conclusion, which means the whole of the work has got translation happening. When we translate something, it's not just beginning and end alone, but the whole work. The trans expression of life confined in the framework of imagery of the work is being translated. So when one experience of caste or one experience of partition is being portrayed in Bharatipura or in Tamas respectively, the expression, it is a trans expression. The expression of life itself is being recreated using the imagery in the source language, which is then later changed into target language. Octavio Paz abridges the case for translation studies, saying that all texts are translations of translations, which means that first it might be in the thought of the actual author in the source language, then that might be translated, that might be read by a translator, later that might be translated again into the target language. So according to Octavio Paz, he says that every single work, be it a translation or an original work, it's all translations. No text is entirely original because there is the change from non-verbal to written. That is, every sign and every phrase is the translation of another sign and another phrase. However, this argument can be turned around without losing any of its validity, where we can say that all texts are original because every translation is distinctive. Even if it is a translated work, it is distinctive in nature. And every translation up to a certain point is an invention, and as such, it constitutes a unique text. Translation of literary prose is different from literary creativity because its existence depends on the existence of an object of translation. We need a source text in order to have a translation in the first place. And translation is a challenging activity. There are few difficulties. Every language portrays the world in a diverse way, so it is very difficult to change the whole structure. As when it is a prose work, especially if it's novel, it would be very long. Um, We have different words in different languages. For example, Greek has separate words for light blue and dark blue, where in English we won't have such separate words. And difficulty in translation just lies in the fact that both the content and the style are already existent. So we can't create a content or style, but we have to recreate it in another language. We have to reproduce them. The most particular problems that the translators face include illegible text, missing references, several constructions of grammar, dialect terms and neologisms, rationally vague terminology, inexplicable acronyms and abbreviations, untranslatability, intentional misnaming, particular cultural references, etc. So, can we opt literal translation in such cases? Um, uh, that is not possible in all cases because a particular word in one language often contains meanings that involve several words in another language. Uh, the given example for the word wall is one. German, it has got wand and Mauer, which is, two separate words we have for inside wall and exterior wall. But in English, we just have wall. Grammatical particles, which verb tenses, singular, dual, plural, case markers are not available in every language. Idioms of one language and culture may be utterly confusing in another language. So this conflicting relationship with other sets outside its boundaries lead to a kind of failure where the translators finally concentrate on particular parts of a text at the cost of others. So some way or the other, certain things would be lost. And it is easier for the prose translator to consider content as separate from form, but not at the expense of the wholesome translation. So these are the kinds of translation shifts that happen. There are structure shifts involving grammatical alteration. There are class shifts when a source language item is translated with a target language item belonging to a diverse grammatical group. We have unit shifts happening, which are alterations in positions of words, and intra-system shifts, which occurs when source language and target language possess systems which approximately correspond formally as to their constitution. But when translation involves selection of a non-corresponding term in the target language system. For example, in source language, it might be singular, but in target language, it becomes plural. So these are the types of target shifts that happen. That's all. Thank you.